morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. It looks like April is going out with a whimper, at least in Hollywood, because nothing's really going on right now. We have no big headlines, no big movies are coming out this weekend. They're all expected to be moderate to low performers, and as a result, no big trailers are debuting to play in front of those movies. So you really have a calm before the summer storm. So effectively, Hollywood has all their pieces in play, and now they're just waiting to see how you react. Because there are a lot of question marks here. They want to know what franchises they're getting right and they can move forward on. What needs to be perhaps rehauled, reworked, overhauled to see what maybe they can fix and continue with, and maybe what needs to be scrapped. All in terms of franchises and talent. There are some new faces coming into play, some things that need to see if they were one-hit wonders across the board. So it'll be a very interesting summer indeed. And of course, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is kicking things off, and it's already even opened overseas in numerous countries and doing quite well. Although the reaction has been mixed. Some people really love the film. They think it's a huge improvement over the first and a great Spider-Man movie. But some people have also been underwhelmed and feel that it doesn't really deliver what it promises, maybe a little overcrowded. But another side effect that I'm seeing, which is what I wanted to discuss today, is this new phenomenon of spoilers. And that our overseas friends, perhaps they're just very excited to finally be getting these movies first, are kind of intentionally ruining these big blockbusters for us. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this, but for instance, yesterday, Alan Mitchell tweeted me the ending of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in as great detail as he could in like 140 characters. And to the point where I even tweeted him back and said, Alan, why do you want to ruin the ending of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 for me? And he said, I'm just trying to save you time. But, I mean, of course, Alan, you know I have to see this movie, not only to review it, but because it's also a very big deal in Hollywood, and that's, you know, what I like to discuss on this channel, so I want to see it for that reason. And also because it's the first big, I'm also a comic book fan, and also it's the first big movie of the summer, kicking off the summer movie season. Of course I want to go. It's like a ritual for us frequent moviegoers. So I was just really surprised to see that happening. And I've been seeing it more and more, where people just seem to gleefully, as I said, want to spoil the ending of the film for the rest of us who haven't gotten it yet. I even have to go into a lot of videos sometimes and erase spoiler comments, and they're reposted on multiple videos, across a few days. So I have to go back and check and hope I can delete it before anybody else sees it, because spoilers are kind of a part of the job when you're covering films. But for someone who is just enjoying them recreationally, there's no reason for you to get a spoiler if you don't want one. Now, spoilers are tricky, granted. I think some people on the internet have discussed that there are certain rules, like once something's been up for a day, for a television show maybe, or a week for a movie, then spoilers become more fair game. For instance, just the other day with my interview with Jared Harris for The Quiet Ones yesterday, a few people said, oh, you have Mad Men spoilers in here. But I think that was fair because the instances we were talking about on Mad Men happened, I think, like 1 or 2 years ago. So if you're that behind on a show or a movie, that becomes kind of on you to watch out for spoilers. But for these big movies, I think the rule, and I'm guilty of unintentional spoilers, which that's a different conversation, and I apologize for that when that's happened. But I think that once a movie's been out for a week, I think as long as you give a spoiler warning to some degree, you're okay. And once a movie's certainly been out for a few months, I think that all bets are off. So I'm just surprised about this kind of rampant spoilage, and I think after credit sequences are okay as well. But people wanting to go out there and just tell the ending of the movie, maybe we used to do it when we got the movies first here in the United States. I don't believe that's the case. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I just really hope that people stop doing this, because it's I don't know where it's coming from. It's an interesting phenomenon. And Alan even tweeted me again. Alan's been very nice about this, by the way. I hope that this is just coming from enthusiasm and wanting to discuss The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But Alan said, just announced that Avengers 2 is being released 1 week early for the UK in 2015. What are your thoughts on this? My thoughts, Alan, are please don't spoil the ending of the Avengers Age of Ultron for me. And this is going to be something going on a lot, because a potential problem, because if these spoilers continue, I think the foreign audiences getting these big blockbusters first is not going to end. As you can see, Alan pointed out, Marvel is doing this with the Avengers Age of Ultron. I think that's Marvel's basic release plan, strategy. And you see Warner Brothers doing that with Batman vs. Superman, also planning to release the film a few weeks early overseas. And that's really to get momentum momentum as it hits the U.S. market to get that crucial headline of dominating the U.S. box office. Not just the #1 spot, but getting a huge opening number. Because, some people like to come in there and say, well, you're not counting inflation. But with all due respect, inflation isn't, adjusting for inflation isn't used in Hollywood. The industry doesn't use it, so you have to go by what's the industry norm. But anyway, so you're not going to see this go away, this instance where films open overseas instead of the U.S. It's going to happen, I think, perhaps even permanently, because foreign box office has become such a savior for so many Hollywood movies. So please, I'm asking you very nicely, everybody, all of our friends overseas, I'm glad that the tides have changed and you're getting the movies first, but please don't spoil them for us. And why do you do it if you do spoil it? I'd be interested to know what the motivation is. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story is that while we have this calm before the storm, some of your smaller talent is able to get some headlines because there's nothing else really to report. And one such person is Josh Gad, who seems to be the big winner off of Disney's Frozen, which is quite surprising to me, because I would think if anybody would be a big winner off of that, it would be anyone associated with the song Let It Go. Because I think that really drove the success of the film. That's what pushed it over the edge to make it not just a phenomenon in Hollywood, but a pop culture phenomenon, and just really to rise even above just being a movie. It's almost a movement for Disney animation and the way women are depicted in animation in general. It's just fascinating to see what's going on there. But Josh Gad seems to be the one walking away with the most opportunities instead of Idina Menzel. And also I would think the Lopez's, Robert Lopez and his wife Kristen Anderson Lopez, they're a songwriting duo, and they wrote that song and they changed the course of the film, the narrative of the film, the story. And aren't we seeing that headline where they've been signed on to be the permanent musical team for all the Disney animated films? Perhaps they don't want to do that. I know that the Lopez's are working on other Broadway fare, so maybe they don't want to be in-house at Disney. But I don't know. I would find the check, perhaps, considering the success that they've had for Let It Go. And maybe Idina Menzel just doesn't have the team in place to jump on the opportunities here and really make the most of them, because she's a theatrical talent. But Josh Gad is someone who also started in the theater, by the way, the Book of Mormon. By the time Frozen came out, he had a very good team in place for Hollywood, because he's had a TV show, 1600 Penn. He played the son of a president, like the slacker son of a president who lived in the White House, what that was like. Very unsuccessful show. I tried to watch like 5 minutes of it. I really don't like Josh Gad, by the way. For something about him is grating, in my opinion. And I didn't like him as Olaf. I liked him the most as Olaf, but still not a big Josh Gad fan. And he doesn't have a lot of fans in the mainstream audience. So I find it surprising that Hollywood has picked him. But 16 out of the Frozen cast. It was also Kristen Bell and Jonathan Groff, who I also think are very good talents. I really like Jonathan Groff a lot, actually. So 1600 Penn didn't even make it through an entire season on television, and then he was in Jobs, where he kind of played the live-action version of Olaf, by the way, opposite Ashton Kutcher. So he was already working, and he had his big movie and TV team in place. So I think when Frozen blew up the way it has to be the most successful animated film of all time and the 6th most successful film, just plain film of all time, they really moved in there. And also, Josh Gad is a bit of a self-starter. He's able to write a lot of these projects himself. He has a writing partner, and that's something else. He's generating work as well. So I think if anything, while I don't think Josh Gad was my favorite aspect of the film and who I would have picked to move forward, I think you really have to give him credit for being able to make them so much out of a small opportunity like this. Because I don't even think Olaf is the most popular out of the film. It's not like everybody loves Olaf. When you think of all the Disney huge hits, and that none of that voice talent was able to move forward, Paige O'Hara, Jodie Benson, Belle and the voice of Ariel, they never jumped over out of the theater. They were both theater performers. They never jumped into television or film. To see Josh Gad be able to do this is phenomenal. So what does he have set up? Well, the headline he made was that he just signed a deal to co-write a comedy family adventure for Disney. He also has, of course, Pixels, that Adam Sandler and Kevin James movie with Peter Dinklage set up over at Sony, where video game characters attack the world, and these video game experts are called upon to save the day. He'll be one of them. There's also The Wedding Ringer, which is a romantic comedy over at Screen Gems with Kevin Hart. So that's an interesting property, and Kaylee Cuoco from The Big Bang Theory. Then, of course, he's got Gilligan's Island over at Warner Brothers in play. He's in Zach Braff's Wish I Was Here. He has a small role there. And he's also going to be co-starring with Billy Crystal on FX's The Comedian series. So Josh Gad, wow, he was able to snowball this opportunity into something quite large. And so I'm curious to how you guys feel. Are there Josh Gad fans out there? If you had to pick someone to succeed from Frozen, I know a lot of you are Frozen fans, would it be Josh Gad? Is he the person you want to see more of? Or would you have preferred to see Idina Menzel, Kristen Bell, Jonathan Groff, or the Lopez's be the breakout stars? So that's the second story of the day. We'll get back to Frozen in a moment with the viewer question. It's Frozen really truly is a phenomenon. It's been out for months, and it's still really at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, which is very impressive for Disney. So for the third story of the day, speaking of Steve Jobs, I just talked about how Josh Gad played a supporting role there opposite Ashton Kutcher. They are still moving forward with that movie, even though that David Fincher dropped out, rumored over salary concerns. That also means Christian Bale probably not going to be in there. But the film is still trying to take shape. So we've lost our opportunity for our David Fincher, Aaron Sorkin technology trilogy, or tech trilogy. And also Scott Rudin's part of that team. He produced The Social Network. He's producing this film as well, this Steve Jobs biography. But maybe we'll just get an Aaron Sorkin, Scott Rudin tech trilogy. I still want to see that happen with, of course, Mark Zuckerberg, now Steve Jobs. And I asked who you guys thought should be the third person, and someone recommended Edward Snowden, which I thought was really a great choice. So it'll be interesting to see what materializes. So they're putting the team together, and the person it looks like who's going to take over for Fincher to direct is Danny Boyle. And I think Danny Boyle is a great choice here, because if any filmmaker epitomizes the Apple aesthetic, I think it's Danny Boyle. I think that his films look like an Apple store, and they look beautiful, I'm sure, on Apple products. So I think he's an excellent choice for this. It'll be interesting to see if he can make such a straight narrative, and maybe the film won't be a straight narrative, although if Aaron Sorkin's writing it, I'd be surprised if it gets it all experimental. But I think Danny Boyle is an excellent choice, but I think the person they want to play Steve Jobs now that they're circling instead of Christian Bale is not a good choice, and that's Leonardo DiCaprio. Now yesterday I was just talking about the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio is a very dependable box office star. He really has a strong following, and his audience trusts him. But if you're familiar with Steve Jobs, basically if DiCaprio plays the role, you're just going to have the Wolf of Wall Street without any of the sex or drugs. Because it's going to be more like a very earthy, more hippie-ish Wolf of Wall Street, which I don't know if anybody wants to see. I just don't think that Leonardo DiCaprio is a match with Steve Jobs personally. And I mean, maybe he might feel this is another chance for him to get that Oscar. He's so close. But I don't think this is a good choice for the film or DiCaprio, because I think it's a repeat of what he's just done. I think the role of Steve Jobs is not a very sympathetic role, just like Jordan Belfort as well. It's another business story, and I don't think he particularly looks like Steve Jobs. I think it would be almost Ashton Kutcher in the way it was done. I think it's a shame Christian Bale is not interested in this. Maybe he still is. I would go back to him if I were Scott Rudin and Danny Boyle, because he really is the perfect choice when you think about it. All right, so on to the viewer question. Today's comes from Israel Ruiz, who has been very persistent and polite and patient. The 3 Ps of getting your question answered on Morning Movie News with this question about Frozen. So Israel, I wanted to answer your question today. Thank you for not giving up and understanding that sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get your question answered on here. But Israel has a question about Frozen, as I mentioned. And Israel says, question, hey Grace, love the show. My life would not be complete without it. That's very nice of you to say. And Israel says, so anyway, so they have announced that they will be turning Frozen into a Broadway musical, as we've discussed here on the show. They have also announced they're going to change parts of the storyline. This is not uncommon for Broadway shows, because they need to expand the book. They need to make them a little longer to warrant the ticket price often and the expense. So, for instance, you've seen that with Aladdin and I believe Little Mermaid, etc., Lion King, those big stories. So they've fleshed out the story. They often add a couple new songs as well, often ones that were scrapped from the film. I know Frozen has quite a few songs that didn't make it to the final cut. I'm curious, on a side note, which of those songs you'd like to see in the Broadway version, for those of you who have the deluxe version of the Frozen soundtrack. Some of you have written to me that they're not only very interesting songs, but songs that kind of give away old storylines, the way Frozen was before it was reworked at the very last minute, which actually addresses Israel's question. So Israel continues, says, do you think Disney will seize this opportunity to fill in those plot holes or develop the characters more? And how do you feel about Frozen on Broadway? Thanks, please answer, smiley face, Israel Ruiz. Well, as I just said, I think that if they're going to use some of the songs they cut, they're going to maybe have to make some changes to make those songs make sense, or perhaps those songs can't be used because the story has changed. it'll be interesting to see what route Disney goes here. As for my thoughts on this, let me address that first. I think a Frozen theatrical version, a live-action theatrical version, is a no-brainer. Even though I have my problems with the film, it will be just like printing money for Disney. And I think that they make it snow on Main Street all the time in the theme parks, so I see no reason they couldn't make it snow in the movie theater. And I think you have the opportunity for some wonderful sets. And I think that Frozen as a film didn't have any huge set pieces, actually, when you think about it, so it could actually translate quite well to the stage in that way as well. Sometimes when you think about movies like The Little Mermaid or Aladdin, you think of certain sequences and you wonder how they could ever hoped to recapture them on the stage in a live action way. For instance, the magic carpet ride from Aladdin, Ariel, all under the sea. How do you do that on stage? But I think Frozen is very well structured, perhaps because of the Lopez's. I think they brought some of the strongest Broadway aspects to an animated film yet. Of course, Menken and Ashman came from the theater as well, but I think they made their choices more geared towards film and animation. But I feel the Lopez's are pure Broadway, and you saw a lot of that in Frozen. So I think this could be maybe their best translation yet. As for fixing some of the problems with the story, I don't know if Disney will go there. I think maybe they might try and flesh out Elsa a little bit more because she's so popular. But at the same time, as I've said before here on the show, I think to some degree Disney is not aware why Frozen was such a big hit. So when you don't quite understand why something worked, it's very tricky to therefore expand upon it because you don't want to break it. You don't want, Frozen fans are very, very intense, and obviously, and they should be. I mean, it's great they love this so much. I'm not critiquing that at all, but you don't want to risk angering them. I think the safer route would just be to give them the theatrical version in an amazing way, in the best way they can possible, of what they already saw in the movie. So it'll be curious to see if Disney can figure out why Frozen worked and what they'll choose to expand upon. Will it be more Olaf? Will it be more of the romance between Anna and Kristoff, or will they do more Elsa? Elsa, I think, is the trickiest element here because she's the character that fans gravitated towards the most. They really identified with her. And that's because there were so many blanks in her character. It became very easy to fill them in with your own situation. So if you give Elsa an actual situation, and that doesn't fit with so many people's, and how could it? Because everyone is so different, like a snowflake. You don't want to turn off fans. So I think Disney has a risky situation here. I think they're definitely going to do this. I think it'll be a huge hit. Huge. And I think my guess would be they would actually not expand too much on the original film. I think they're probably going to just go for really amazing people with the set design and the special effects in terms of the ice and the snow, because I think it's too risky for them. But we'll see. We'll see if they're working on it. So I'm curious to what you guys think. Would you go and see Frozen live on stage? What would you want to see them expand upon, if anything? Or do you like Frozen just the way it is? And again, what songs would you like to see included? And do you think that there's any way they could possibly fit? They did include an old song in the recent Aladdin stage version from an earlier version where Jasmine was spoiled, a spoiled princess, but they decided to make it an ironic song where she's singing it to make fun of the way she's perceived. So that's a good instance of using an old song from an old version of the story and reworking it a little bit so that it does work. So thank you so much for your question, Israel. I appreciate your patience, persistence, and politeness, as I said. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today, and you can write down what you think of today's 3 top stories, the viewer question, what you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.